Hi, this is the Social Gelo with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Gelo with Angelo show.
What's up? And welcome to Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. I'm here today with black belt. You're a Kajukenbo black belt, right? I think I said this last time.
Yep.
Yeah. Timothy Bruce. Did I get that right too?
Correct.
All right.
Yep,
two out of two. Not bad. Good start. So today we're talking about guns in the dojo. I think that's the title that we decided to go with. Is martial arts training, should martial arts training include firearms training? That's how I'm gonna should, and if it does, what does that look like? I know specifically for your school, you teach Kajukenbo. You also have like other styles and other types of self-defense systems that you integrate, right? Okay.
Correct.
So let's just start with that. Why why are you integrating firearms training into your martial arts training? We'll start with that.
Okay, so one of the first reasons is it's the strongest force multiplier, right? You hear that word a lot thrown around in the gun industry, but if I have an old lady come in that's 62 years old, she cannot dedicate enough time to her hand-to-hand combat. It's easier to teach her basic boxing and wrestling skills and then give her more time on the range. That's going to keep her safer sooner if you look over ability over time of progression. Okay. On top of that, there's only so much that a knee and an elbow and a punch can do. If it's 2 or 3 individuals attacking you for whatever reason, you need something to equal out the odds. And that's what the firearm is.
And so you mentioned the range.
Hmm?
How logistically, how does the firearms training work? Because I mean, obviously you don't have a gun range. Maybe you do. Maybe I'm making some assumptions here. I'm assuming that you don't have a gun range at the dojo. So
Correct.
Okay, we'll start with that. All right, so you're going. So how do you fit that into your schedule? Like, do you take them out to the gun range on a separate day? Well, logistically, what's that look like?
So I'm partnered up with a local gun range here that's about 15 minutes away from the dojo. So what happens is we do a lot of our soft training or I guess harder training in the dojo where we use either proxy firearms, either 3D printed firearms, or sometimes even just unloaded, taped up firearms. That way we can actually use this actual heft of our weapons for more of our hands-on wrestling to our weapon or using our grappling to our weapon. But then when it's time to get on the range, we just mainly just pressure test and make sure your point of aim skills are good. And that's another thing too, is you're talking about should martial arts, guns be in martial arts, but guns are martial arts. Martial is warlike, right? So there's art to the gun itself that we have to train as well, and then crossing that with our wrestling and our striking. But logistically speaking, we usually try to get 2 or 3 days out on the range when we can. More for those that are interested, I hook them up with the instructors at the range who just dedicate themselves to firearms instructing. And then we do all of our getting to your weapon, knowing how to fight to your weapon, how to create reactionary gaps to handle situations so you can get to your weapon. And that goes for our firearms and our knives and whatever else weapons people use. But generally speaking, around here, we focus on our guns.
And how did you end up? Because obviously, I told people this came up the other day. I was doing a live with Hackelman, and someone was like, "Why do I do Kajukenbo in New York and we're doing a bunch of Filipino martial arts, and it sounds like what you're doing is very different from that. Well, why is it so different?" And then I couldn't say much because I'm hosting the show, so I'm like his producer on the show, so I couldn't jump in. But one of the things that I was thinking about was like, this comes up a lot, and it's because and for those of you who this is your first episode, Kajukenbo is a American martial art from Hawaii. Google it. At the end of this episode, there's a podcast about that. But what that question is weird to me, not weird to me. I think that question is asked a lot by people who are newer in Kajukenbo because they don't realize that different instructors can branch out to wherever they want to go once they get their black belt. So even if they work from a more quote unquote traditional path of Kajukenbo with the punch tricks and katas and stuff, when they get their black belt, they're allowed to branch out into other stuff. So like, how did you end up branching out into firearms training? Did your instructor have that in his training, or is that something that you went off and found on your own?
So my original Kajukenbo instructor was an ex-Marine and
Oh, okay.
part-time. He was a part-time officer as well as sheriff's officer in the area. So yes, he had firearms, but it wasn't something that he even taught us. It's more so something that he just conversate with us about. And then as I got older, I grew up in Mississippi, where firearms is just part of the daily routine, and got into learning about firearms, firearm safety. Hell, I even had my firearms course and hunting course in school. So, that it was just integrated into your daily life. So of course, if I'm a lifelong martial artist, integrating firearms into your daily life goes a long way. And before I moved to Mississippi, I actually grew up in Rhode Island, which was more poverty stricken, a lot more gang violence type area. So I seen gun violence specifically fairly often. So as soon as I was old enough to train on a firearm and train to carry a firearm, I hit the ground running.
Okay, so all right. So you spent most of your life doing firearms training. So
Exactly.
that's wait. So now my question is, which one came, chicken or the egg here? Were you doing martial arts first?
Kajukenbo came. Yep,
Kajukenbo first.
Kajukenbo came
Okay,
first.
okay. That's all right. All right. So
Yeah.
Kajukenbo came first, and then but in the background, it seems like throughout your whole life you've been handling firearms and going through firearms
Correct.
training courses. How?
Yep.
So when you started teaching, and your instructor talked about firearms training, but you actually integrated firearms training into your training. And I'm guessing you have more. I have no idea. How do firearms certifications work? That's I guess, because I'm
So you have a lot of you got a lot of overbranching, just like how martial arts has their, you have a Kajukenbo society. The same thing for firearms. You got a few different ones that offer courses to be a concealed carry instructor, or a concealed carry instructor's instructor, or you have guys who are usually ex-military, ex-police, that teach courses in certain tactics or certain concepts of training, like barricade shooting, shooting through vehicles and whatnot. But most of my training's always been towards the everyman. More often than not, we're not going to be needing to shoot through our car window, which that doesn't usually work out too well anyway. Most of the training that I offer is, you're owning a gun, you're going to carry a gun, you need to know how to fight before you even do that. And then if you're going to have that gun, you need to know how to create the space to get it, how to properly draw it, how to properly wear it, and how to accurately shoot it in the stress situation. Going over gross motor function, just like a Kajukenbo would look at it. You can't work on the fine-tuned little things in a fight. You can only rely on your gross motor function. It's the same thing with firearms. So that's how I integrate that into the Kajukenbo, using the Kajukenbo philosophies towards towards firearms.
And so what does your certification say? Like, so what, because you just mentioned like 3 or 4 different types of certifications in that field. What certification do you hold?
None. Right.
Okay.
When it comes to firearms, like I said, most guys are usually ex-military, ex this, but the way it boils down to is I'm just a paid firearms instructor. That it's more of a job description than it is a certification. And kind of like how I view martial arts too, and how you'll see it in Kajukenbo and every martial arts, it's not so much the certificate or the black belt that matters. It's more so the information. So you got guys out here that are teaching firearm stuff that don't know how to fucking hold a gun. And then you got guys who know how the basics of things. It's like a guy who says he knows how to box and can't box. And if you know how to box, you can. It's the same thing. Think of it more like boxing than Kajukenbo, whereas the certification is the ability.
So if I understood you correctly, then what you're actually doing then is you're incorporating firearms handling, but then the actual firearms training is when you take them to the gun course. So those are the people that are handling the actual.
Sometimes it's me.
Okay.
Right. If they're wanting to get their concealed carry license, they have to go through the instructors, just because they have to do a state ran program. Otherwise, just like you don't need to have a dojo to train someone to fight, you don't need a certificate to teach someone how to shoot. You know what I mean? There's no one who can tell you how to throw a punch or governs you how to teach a punch. It's the same thing. No one governs how you teach someone to shoot firearms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that for Hackelman's program, what he does, he has for him, I forgot if he brings them in or if he takes them there, but he actually has a certified firearms instructor that teaches law enforcement.
Yeah.
And he that's the first, so he subcontracts that at his
That's
place.
that's what my range partners do.
Okay, so
They
yeah,
do the same that.
so that's what
But
you're doing. So that's what I'm checking on. So that's because
folks
anybody
don't have
who's
to. They
what's
don't
that?
really go through that for the training. They go through that for the licensing,
Okay,
the concealed carry license.
okay, and then he has a firearms course that's run by those guys that he
Yeah.
participates in as well.
That's where the difference is where most people like outsource the training itself as well. I usually keep to the training because a lot of things. One of the big things with me being a martial arts nerd and then a firearms nerd as well is actually seeing where the layover is. So if I'm spending hours a day teaching people how to throw a cross, and for us we roll our shoulders high, it's the same thing when you present your firearm. It's the same mechanic. The same thing with a good proper shooting stance is a proper open boxing stance or a peekaboo style boxing stance. So the way we already box is already the way you should stand when you shoot your gun. So I use a lot of crossover between the boxing and wrestling and Kajukenbo I already teach. And I translate that to how you need to stand, how you need to operate when you're using a firearm.
Have you ever thought about getting the license to be like officially a firearms
Yeah.
instructor?
Yep. I'm going through that process currently. I just recently partnered up with this range about 6 months ago because they only opened up about 8 months ago. The issue is it's just like any other kind of pyramid scheme type thing. Usually they want $1,000, 10 hours to show them that you know the basics, and then they give you a piece of paper that says you can do it. What I'm doing now is this range is bringing me in as their hand-in-hand instructor for a state-run program.
Oh, okay.
And part of me helping teach this because they need a hand-to-hand expert for their state, what's called security officers training.
Oh, okay.
So to have me coming in on that, they're going to cross-train me on their licensing.
Oh, okay.
And that's how that's going to operate.
Yeah, because anybody watching this is asking the same thing. Like, anybody watching this is asking the same thing. It sounds like you're teaching without certification. Now that brings us into a whole other podcast that I don't want to do right now. Like, I don't want to go into the whole like that's a can of worms, man. If we start going down the path of certifications, I want to do a separate podcast about the pluses and minuses of certifications, because there's certification guys, man. You've seen them. They got like a million certifications, and like, I got a certification in Krav Maga, I got a this and that. And they post them, like, if you look at their Facebook page, it's like all certs. It's just all one cert after cert.
9 times out of 10, that guy can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. So that's my thing. Like, I'm not big on. I never chase the papers on the wall. I just chase the training. So that's why I don't really follow those paths anyway. I've always chased the training and the knowledge and teaching it correctly rather than trying to go out of my way and spend a couple grand to get a piece of paper that says I did it.
Yeah. And again, I guess we're already going there. We're not gonna go there too long, but we're already going there. So now that I open the damn can of worms, I gotta find a way to put the lid back on. But I think there's a balance there, right? So you're saying like you're going through another program to get your cert. I think there has to be a balance between, you need some sort of certification so that you can show people that you did do that. But there is that BS part, like you just said, where you are paying, and where is that certification really coming from, right? I only hold, right now, I only hold one certification to teach martial arts under Kajukenbo. That's it. There are others on the way, and to avoid any political problems, I'm not going to announce what those are. But there are. But this is why I'm saying the way I'm saying it is there are other styles I train in, and one of those styles is I'm currently in the process of getting an instructor certificate for. Now, going back to guns in the dojo.
Yep. Let's do that.
So one of the things that it's like for me, I'm in Japan. There's no way. Now, did come up because one of my students is a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
So because he's a police officer, we had to cover what he would do, because one of the biggest things, even in Japan, is usually someone has a knife and the police officer has a gun. And they have a bunch of rules about when they're allowed to pull out the gun. And I told them very honestly, I told him like very honestly right off the bat, hey, I am not a firearms instructor. That was right off the bat. I think honesty is the best thing. This kind of tied to that whole certification thing. Honesty is the best route you can go. So like that's all. I'm not a firearms instructor. Now, if you want to do those kind of drills, I'm also not a combatives instructor. And I told him I'm not a combatives instructor. I'm a Kajukenbo instructor. I can teach you everything that comes within the Kajukenbo skill sets, but when it comes to firearms or police safety or weapons handling, I'm not from that. I contacted some of my friends that are in that, and we did some Zoom lessons on combatives for knife handling and stuff. They're certified in that stuff, and then after we did that, then I said, okay, now we have some official drills that come from people that do firearms training and weapons training in America. Let's go ahead and go over those drills. Now I can do this drill with you, and we did some drills. But I mean, for the most part, firearms training looks very different for law enforcement than it does a citizen. In Japan, I wouldn't even do it. Like I wouldn't even feel comfortable with a citizen because of the way the laws work. You're not supposed to have a gun. End of story. So if you're a citizen, that's what are you practicing really? And that's in his case, there's like an exception because he's law enforcement. How do you manage that? You're not in law enforcement? I've never asked.
I'm not. No.
So like, how do you handle that? Are any of your students in law enforcement?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure this comes up. How do they handle when you start talking about your firearms training? What kind of input do you get from them in those kind of situations?
The main thing is we all look at the same statistics, and a lot of my course training is based on police because they have the most real world statistics when it comes to grappling, striking with a firearm on you, or someone wrestling for your firearm, or you having to wrestle for your firearm. So a lot of the training we go through is from police data and things that have worked in the police atmosphere, and then translating that to a civilian mentality. So like for them, the main thing is there's not actually as much of a disconnect between the two. It's not gunfighting and martial arts. It's you are either a martial artist or a martial artist with a gun. Does that make sense? So when they have their duty belt on, we still train the same wrestling we would. It's still underhooks, still overhooks, it's still head control and framing and posture. It's just now they have an extra thing they have to protect while they're doing that. They have a side they have to favor, But otherwise, you're still a martial artist. Just like when I teach stick fighting and knife fighting. If you got a weapon in your hand, that doesn't nullify your boxing and your wrestling. Now you're a boxer and a wrestler with a stick. It's the same thing with the firearms. So a lot of our jiu-jitsu, if we're training with our proxy guns and everything, when we're doing our jiu-jitsu, it makes it where certain types of guards, knee guard, and just pulling an open guard is more important because you need to be able to have your appendix open so that you can actually clear your shirt and get to your weapon if you get taken down. Or knowing how to turtle up specifically defensively so that you can hide your gun away so that you can get to it freely without hands involved so you can turn over and get a shot off. So it's all the same martial art. There's really not a whole lot of like extra added to it other than pressure testing. And that's the biggest thing. A lot of gun guys don't pressure test. A lot of cops. I think the statistic that we always cite is that 70% of cops have lost their gun on the line of duty, lost their gun in the draw. And the reason is that because they go to draw their firearm and they're getting attacked or they're already being grappled while they try to draw their gun. Why? Because they don't know how to fight. Most cops, most trained people just don't know how to fight at an applicable level or get pressure tested enough at an applicable level. So what we go over is we put the gear on, we put mouth guards on, we put sparring gear on, and we get at it until the timing is right to get to your weapon. You don't want to draw your weapon when a guy's already punching you. You want to block, you want to fight back, you want to clinch up, you want to create the space, then get to your firearm. So when the cops come in, that's the main thing we do is they have their duty belt on, which is worse because now it's a out in the open firearm that's easy to reach. And they have to be more mindful of that. But otherwise, it's the same cross collar ties. It's the same posting. It's the same clinch work, bicep controls and knees to create some damage to want your opponent to push you off. And then once your opponent pushes you off, then you can get to your weapon. But otherwise, it's the same punches and kicks that we all do.
Then again, yeah. So, and I don't know if I framed the question as should there be gun. I never really framed it as should guns be in the dojo. We were just talking about how martial arts is part of guns are part of martial arts training, or I guess a really important distinction here is in America, guns are part of martial arts training. It's a really important distinction to be made here as far as like geographics, right? Because Kajukenbo was worldwide.
Yeah.
And like that's something that I've done a few episodes with with John Hoylo, and we went over the legalities, just legal aspects of like, well, in Japan and in America, or if whatever country you're in, how that changes how you train. And I remember hearing people from the UK going to the US for gun training because they can't even get the gun training in the UK. So they go to the US for gun training and they go back to the UK. So at that point, how would you address the idea that it's a power fantasy? In other words, some people feel that when you start doing a lot of gun training, but yeah, it doesn't sound like you're doing that much gun training. You're doing gun training like 2 or 3 times a week.
Probably 2 or 3 times every other week.
Okay, so it's not even like
it's not the main.
You're not one of those guys like you're not wearing camo every day in your classes. In fact, I've seen your classes; they look very similar to like and the way an MMA program would work. You got jiu-jitsu, boxing, so it's like something. It's like something that Hackelman talks about. It's extracurricular. It's like one more thing in your program that a student can go out and do that happens every so once in a while to cover this niche issue, especially in the US, because guns, like it or not, there are people with guns. There are people with guns in the US. It's just whether you agree that I don't want to get in the political side of this, but whether you agree that people should or shouldn't, the fact is they do. So it is something that, especially if you're in the US, you should be aware of. Where was I going with that? I was going somewhere with that. Oh, so yeah, so again, how do you address those people that say that, especially online? Like, you're doing gun training, that's just a power fantasy, because that's never gonna happen. Kempo sucks. Those people usually say that kind of stuff too. Well, how do you address some of that?
So funny enough, there's those trolls on both ends of the spectrum, and they get at me both. So you got the guy who's, I carry a gun, I don't need to learn how to fight, I can punch him or I can shoot a guy. That's the guy that usually gets beat up and his gun taken, or he fails to draw his weapon properly because he never pressure trained. Okay. And then you got the reverse side of the spectrum. You got a martial artist who's like, I don't need a gun, I can fight. Then he gets jumped by 3 people, or he gets shot, or someone else pulls a knife on him, and then his Kajukenbo goes out the window and the other guy got a knife. So how I like to address it is the fact that you should be if you're training for self-defense specifically. If you're training for the art, you don't need guns in your art unless you want to do hojutsu or something like that, or do some sort of gun kata. But otherwise, if you're training for self-defense in America, where guns are prominent, stabbings are prominent, and their CDC said there's about 1 million defensive gun uses last year, or over the last few years, it is common. It's common enough. It's just as common as getting attacked with a baseball bat, or someone punching you, or starting a fight and you needing Kajukenbo. Just as likely as you are to need your Kajukenbo, you're just as likely to need a firearm, or at least something. And again, going back to like the 62-year-old ladies that don't have the time of day or the hips to train Kajukenbo all the time, or train their body to be into a point where they could fight off an 18-year-old thug. They need the ability to even the playing field, and that's what the firearm at least brings to them. So it's one of those things where I give them a little bit less focus on their boxing, wrestling skills, and make sure they have better firearms fundamentals. So that's one of the things where it's based per person. What do you need? And that's my big thing is like, I got like my older brother is a firearms guy and a firearms instructor, and he'll sit there and argue with you that it's better to be on the range than the dojo. Every minute in the dojo is a minute you're not getting better at the gun range or getting better with your weapon. But I'm the guy that tries to meet him halfway, and yeah, that gun is great. That gun is going to nullify the threat. But if you get knocked the fuck out before you get to draw your gun, or you get taken down and sat on before you get to that gun, you have no skills to get out of that situation, you're fucked either way. So I really try to find the middle ground. I'm probably more leaning towards the martial arts, because outside of just defensive uses of a firearm, using martial arts for other reasons, such as fitness, such as keeping people safely de-escalating situations, you get a lot of that from the martial arts that you don't get on the range.
So we're almost close to the time that we said we'd wrap up in. I think we started a little later, but yeah, I think we're at. I don't know.
We got a while. I got
Okay.
till clock out time. I got about 30-40 minutes.
Okay. Well, either way, I try to keep it within. I try to keep these within 30 minutes, whatever. But so how old are you? If you don't mind.
28.
You're 20. You're 28.
Mhm.
Oh, you're a young man.
Yep.
You're 28. So at 28, how many? And again, I'm not trying to be an asshole here. I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just gonna. I'm trying to address questions that do come up that someone might even be typing later on YouTube. How many altercations between the time you're 28 in your life have involved a knife or a gun for you personally?
I've had 2 gun issues in my life, and then 2 knife issues. One of the knife issues occurred when I was real young, when I was about 13 in Rhode Island, and there was a school fight occurring, and 2 guys were about to fight. One kid pulled a knife, and we tried to stop the kid with the knife, and we just disarmed him, and then got that little dinky pocket knife out of the situation. I've had people pull guns on me and my brother before. I've had people pull guns at bars before. So those situations have came up. Now, I've never been in any kind of deadly shooting. I've never had to shoot anyone. I've had to draw a firearm once or twice, and that's usually from being in a situation where someone was where they weren't supposed to be and had a weapon on them, or situations like that. I'd say I probably use my martial arts a hell of a lot more. I've had a more hand-to-hand combat uses of martial arts than I have ever needed firearms. But going back to that power fantasy, it's more so a safety fantasy. You feel safer having a firearm. You feel safer knowing that if someone else has something bad, that you have something good. Better than need it, not have than whatnot.
And then
so
some of the knife altercations when you were a kid, the gun altercations, were those the alleged? Because I know we have this is on the internet. The alleged gun altercations, that was as an adult or as a kid? Like,
no, I was probably 14, 15 when that happened. One of those happened. I can remember specifically 2 altercations. We had a lot of drive-bys when I was a kid, growing up in Rhode Island. So guns just going off and windows getting shot out, fairly common, walking to school. And then I had at least one that I can think of when I was an adult, 15, but different lifestyles. But fellow angry at my brother, shows up drunk, pulls gun, pointing gun at the house. My brother runs out. Brother has a firearm, trying to de-escalate the situation. Those situations have occurred for me. And that it's because those situations occurred, and having people kick in doors when I was a kid in Rhode Island, and drive-bys happening, and people just randomly shooting other people. That's the reason why I carry. Even now, living in an extremely safe environment where I live now currently, it's still, I'd rather know that I have the ability to keep others safe by having that than not, especially with the escalation of bad people coming in the world, to put it simply, without getting political.
And so it's safe to say that that stuff happened before you were 18.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So like, here's some more statistics that are interesting, and people can take this for what they want. Most men in the US, this is something that came across in my criminology courses, because so my major, yes, I have a master's in psychology, but as an undergraduate, I had a degree in social science, so I had to study psychology and sociology. And then a lot of people, I know sociology has like a really bad rap right now politically because of all the shit that happened, but cops have to study sociology and criminology to get to move into higher ranks in law enforcement. So like if someone wants to become a criminologist and move their way up in law enforcement and become a detective and that kind of stuff, one way to do that for them is to become criminologists, and they end up studying sociology. They end up in those same courses learning about fucking crazy shit like Karl Marx, right? Oh, bunch of socialists. Well, they learn all these concepts so that they know what they're dealing with in the world, right? So like, because of that, I ended up taking criminology courses too, because it was under that same umbrella. And in the criminology courses, they talked about how most men, specifically genderized here, men in the US, experience the most amounts of violence up until they're about the age of 25. Across the board, even if you are in a safe environment, as a young man in the US, there's a high chance that you're going to experience a lot of violence and altercations with law enforcement on top of that, because your violence is going to spill out. And they also, psychologists talked about this as well, because it has to do with the development of your prefrontal cortex. English, your brain, the front part of your brain controls reasoning. It's still developing. For some reason, they're still trying to figure out why. It tends to develop a little slower for us guys. It does for girls. It does for girls. I can see this with my daughter. It's just so like, but yeah. And this is not to bash guys or anything. It's just statistically, not everyone. Some guys. This is not like all the guys are just a bunch of brutes. No, not the majority, but just on average, we develop a little slower there. So because of that, we tend to make more rash decisions. We don't reason things through. We are a little more apt to use violence, solve problems that probably didn't require violence. So this, you kind of put these statistics together with what you just mentioned, right? A lot of violence ends up occurring in men's lives on average in the US under the ages of 25. And then I'll couple that with the psychological concept of trauma, right? So what's that do to you? So how does that change you as a guy? So a lot of people, they see people like me and they say, well, it's kind of overkill, right? Kajukenbo is overkill. I've heard that a lot. I also came from a dangerous neighborhood, and I started analyzing. I'm like, well, when I really think about this, I asked myself the same questions I just asked you. How many violent encounters did I encounter after 18? There were a few more. There was one where a gang member was walking in front of my front yard. Someone was lurking. I didn't know who it was.
Yeah.
And I was married, so I was probably like 22 at that point. I was still under 25. So, I was like, I was still, no. Wait. No, my dad passed away. Oh, I was like 26. I was like 26, 25. Still on that cusp of 25. And I heard a guy lurking in my front yard. And I'm like, oh shit, there's a guy lurking in the front yard. So I turned on the lights on him, and as he was kind of near my front door. So I'm like, all right, I don't know what this guy's doing, right? But I have like a gate, and I hear him right there. So I opened the door, and what I have, I think I had a set of nunchucks on me, because I just grabbed whatever was near the door. I have like blades and allegedly in the US, I had weapons scattered around my house. And so I think I had a pair of nunchucks, and I came out and I asked him what's going on, and he reached into his side. He was like getting ready to draw, and just stopped right there, and we de-escalated the situation. It turns out he was hiding. Biggest thing that happened in my neighborhood, usually a gang member hiding from a gang. Like, he's from a rival gang, and my yard is a little dark. He's using my yard to hide.
Yeah.
So like the de-escalation process always involved me telling him I don't want problems. He doesn't want problems. I'm gonna turn off the lights so you can keep hiding, but you gotta get the fuck out of here, or there's gonna be more problems. So like that was usually the kind of stuff that I would end up with when I was younger. Of course, once I moved out of that neighborhood, that didn't happen anymore. The jumpings, most of the violence happened for us. But what's that do to you as you get older? I'm 40 now. I'm living in Japan. There's really no reason to hold on to these things, but they make an imprint on the rest of your life. So I think a lot of the people that jump online and they're like, they'll criticize it. Can't speak to that. Maybe you didn't live that kind of life. Hackleman gets really pissed off. It's like, what kind of privileged life did you live where you didn't have to worry about violence? Like, if you,
I share a lot of that sentiment. I don't get pissed off so much as like, I try really hard, especially in like an area like this, to get these kids to understand that you didn't grow up in a place with violence, but it does exist, and I just want you to be ready for it. Really, I really try hard to make sure that they empathize with the fact that violence is going to be out there, and they may go their entire lives without it, but I'd rather that people be ready. And that's my big thing. I'm a martial artist, but I'm a coach. I'm an instructor. I'm a sensei. I care about the students I train. That's one of the reasons why my combatives isn't kata based or board breaking based. It's sparring, it's boxing, it's proven techniques and things that I know that work and things I know other people know that work, because I want people to be safe. Because I had my ass kicked when I was a kid doing Kempo. I went down those paths of someone else had a gun and I didn't. And now I just make it my goal to make sure that people I train are safe. And how I know they're safe is because I know they're learning proper fighting techniques, combative techniques, martial arts, and that for little old ladies and women who are smaller than I am that need to be able to defend themselves against a much larger man, they need to have their martial art and a weapon, especially if they're going places where they might need it.
And again, I just look at the training. So, and again, I'm in Japan. I don't even know gun. Again, I told my wife this, like, we're in Japan. If I was in the US, I told her, like, I probably would in the US. So, like, but here's the deal. When I look at that kind of training and the criticism that a lot of people online, especially like the online community, people that maybe watch the show, there's like a huge sport, and this is not, again, I'm not criticizing, and you do the same thing. Your guys train, and I've seen you guys train, and it's, you told me, you are open to sport. You've done jiu-jitsu, you do tournaments in jiu-jitsu and MMA, and it's not like people always are very one-sided, like, oh, because you do MMA, therefore you don't do self-defense, or if you do combatives, and it's because there are people on those extremes that only do combatives and no sport, right? Or only do sport and no combatives. Kind of in a balanced viewpoint, I just like to see it as insurance. It's just insurance. Exactly. You have homeowners insurance. If you have a house, you have homeowners insurance. You're probably never going to use it. In fact, if you look at the clauses in the homeowners insurance, it doesn't cover shit. Like it really doesn't. I have homeowners insurance for my house in California, and it's like, oh, if there's a fire, which, by the way, fires are the biggest problem in fucking California, we're not going to cover your house.
For the major
the one thing for the major threat. But it doesn't mean I don't pay my homeowner's insurance. Like, I'm still going to pay, because I don't know, like, it does cover certain stuff, like if a tree falls or whatever, stuff that I don't think would ever happen, but I'm not going to just not
It's all about uncertainty. It's all about uncertainty and preparation. Proper preparation is poor performance.
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at for this conversation. Like, people that criticize it saying, oh, well, you'll never fucking need it. It's power fantasy. Maybe. And if it is, great, good for you. You're living a great life. You must have a nice neighborhood you live in. Never have to worry about that. That's nice. Nice. Congratulations on living a nice life. But you can't argue that it's gonna hurt. I mean, it's like insurance. It doesn't hurt to have.
I can argue that, though. See, there's too many people. There's also the other side of the spectrum. There's too many people who have no fucking training with a firearm and pick one up and put it in their purse or put it on their hip and have no clue what the danger they're carrying around is. They're actually putting more people in danger carrying that because they don't get training. The gun itself is not the solution. The solution is training, whether it be martial or firearms or however you want to slice or dice it. Train. You're going to carry a gun? Train. You think you're going to get in fights? Train. You're going to go bounce? Train. You're going to be a cop? Train. So I just, like you said, it's an insurance policy, but it's an insurance policy that needs to be backed up too.
And training, right? I think you made a very important distinction, even in the whole political realm. If you look at the political debate on this, one of the things they're always saying is more training. That's there. Yep. That's baked into that political debate. I'm not even going to say which side is saying it. But one of the things that's in there, and we're all agreeing here, that training. As a martial arts instructor, I say fucking train. Like,
get on the mat.
There's a real simple thing. Whenever I see someone, like, they see me doing a YouTube channel, so they start commenting. I don't comment very much because I'm busy fucking training. Like, if you follow my Facebook page, you'll notice that it's all training. That's the one thing you can possibly do to make things better is train. It's going to help, and it's. Like you said, in your case, when we're talking about firearms, there is a no training element that can happen there. And like you said, it'll make it even worse. So training is your insurance policy. I think that's what, so when it comes to firearms training, highlighted training is your insurance policy. And that's why guns in the dojo may be something that you want to consider. I'm going to turn that into a YouTube short.
There you go.
Later. It's going to have those flashy lights, little pop-up letters. Anything you want to say before we wrap up, brother?
I think we hit every major mark.
All right. Mark. Ha ha. I saw what you did there. All right. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming out. For my viewers, I try to release one of these a month. That's what I used to say. Lately, it's been like one a week because I'm just so behind in production that I just keep pumping them out. Don't expect that though, please, because one day I would like to get back to one a month. These do take a lot of work. So, Tim, where can they find you, Tim? Where can people find you?
Cult Combatives in Mountain Home, Arkansas, and we're on Facebook at Cult Combatives.
All right, so Cult Combatives, if you want to learn more. Catch y'all next time.